Former President Trump traveling to Milwaukee for today's opening of the Republican National Convention. Just a day after the attempt on his life. In a new interview, Mr. Trump describing his very surreal experience to the New York Post, adding, "I'm not supposed to be here. I'm supposed to be dead." Late Sunday, posting the message, "Unite America," on social media as President Biden addresses a stunned nation from the Oval Office.
You know, the political record in this country has gotten very heated. It's time to cool it down. We all have a responsibility to do that.
Responsibility at the center of growing questions and frustration over how it could happen. A rooftop less than 150 yards from the rally stage left open and accessible. The alleged shooter, seen in this new video, able to fire at least 8 shots from the position before he's taken out by Secret Service snipers.
The buck does stop with the U.S. Secret Service. It's their plan. You're responsible, so you can't deflect blame on anybody else.
President Biden ordering an independent investigation into what many in law enforcement are calling a colossal breakdown and profound security failure.
If that bullet was 2 inches to the right, it would have penetrated the former president's forehead, and we would have a great American tragedy on our hands.
Federal agents searching for a motive say the man accused of pulling the trigger, 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks, is still a mystery, unknown to law enforcement before the attempted assassination. Jay Gray, NBC News, Butler, Pennsylvania. And we now know a cell phone and other electronics belonging to Crooks are being analyzed at the FBI lab in Quantico. Investigators hopeful data can provide a clearer picture of the suspect and why he allegedly wanted to kill the former president. Jay Gray, NBC News, Butler, Pennsylvania.
Take a look at what happened.
From the moments after the attempt on former President Trump's life, the reports of security lapses came quickly.
We're like, hey man, there's a guy on the roof with a rifle. And the police are like, huh, what? You know, like they didn't know what was going on.
The building where the alleged shooter's body was found was roughly 148 yards from where the president spoke and outside the Secret Service's security perimeter. And 2 sources familiar with the agency's operations tell NBC News its roof was identified as a potential vulnerability ahead of the event. A spokesperson for the Secret Service says they designated that rooftop under the jurisdiction of local law enforcement and worked with them to maintain event security, but no one was posted on this particular building. The local district attorney says his office provided support, including sniper teams, but the Secret Service was in charge of security outside of the venue and ran the show. Many on Capitol Hill are demanding to know what went wrong.
We need to know, how could an individual be at that elevation that was seen by apparently bystanders on the ground? How could that not be noticed by Secret Service?
Local law enforcement leaders say they are investigating their preparation for the event and their response after the shooting. Already, a bipartisan pair of lawmakers are calling for increased Secret Service protection for all major presidential candidates. And the House Homeland Security Chairman Mark Green sent a letter to DH Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas demanding information related to the security plans around the rally, pointing out in his letter that, quote, had the bullet's trajectory been slightly different, the assassination attempt on President Trump might have succeeded. The Secret Service also pushed back on reports that they had reduced the security presence around Trump. A spokesman saying, quote, this is absolutely false. In fact, we added protective resources and technology and capabilities as part of the increased campaign travel tempo. But members of Congress want answers.
We need to know, is this a protocol failure? Is this a resources issue? Or is this just a failure of those who were on site that day?
Take a look at what happened.
The attempted assassination of former President Trump, highlighting the ongoing political polarization in America.
I know him. Donald Trump is a loser.
Joe, you dumb son of a...
Fears now the nation has reached a boiling point.
All of us to turn down any kind of the temperature.
We all need to take a responsibility to cool things down, to say what we mean, but don't say it mean.
Some Republicans have blamed President Biden for Saturday's violence.
I do believe that Joe Biden is responsible for the shooting today. Everyone who has called him a fascist, everyone who has called him a threat to democracy.
Democrats have long accused former President Trump of using incendiary language while campaigning. Last year, Trump mocked the violent attack on then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband.
She's against building a wall at our border, even though she has a wall around her house, which obviously didn't do a very good job.
According to a University of Maryland criminologist who's tracked political violence over a 50-year span, incidents have been on the rise since 2016. In recent years, dangerous language coming from politicians and pundits has been amplified by social media. The hateful rhetoric increasing, and so is the real-world violence. In 2017, a man opened fire at a Republican congressional baseball team practice, wounding then Republican House Majority Whip Steve Scalise. While in 2020, the FBI foiled a plot to kidnap and kill Michigan Democratic Governor Gretchen Whitmer, and President Trump famously saying this on January 6th.
If you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore.
Congress later impeached Trump for his role in the attack on the Capitol, though former President Trump says he bears no responsibility for the violence that day. And now, the first shooting of a U.S. president since Ronald Reagan was nearly killed more than 40 years ago. Voters across the political spectrum are concerned.
I hope that this is not used for propaganda to support violence one way or the other.
Whether you're left or right, that there is no tolerance and there's no room for terrorism, for violence, for assassination attempts in this country.
We may have differences, but we can still have one goal in common, is to be, civil to each other.
The country's leaders warning the current political climate cannot continue.
The greatest threat to our nation right now is we're horribly divided.
The Republican National Convention kicking off under an intense political and security spotlight, just days after the assassination attempt on former President Trump. The Secret Service says they're ready to keep the four-day convention safe and secure.
We are fully prepared and have a comprehensive security plan in place, and we're ready to go.
That plan, officials say, developed over 18 months, had already been designated the highest-level security event. Milwaukee's police chief with this message on Sunday.
We got this. We got this.
Former President Trump flying to Milwaukee Sunday night, writing on social media the shooter who targeted him would not, quote, force change to scheduling or anything else about the convention. One thing that is changing is Mr. Trump's convention speech. In an interview with the Washington Examiner, the former president saying, quote, it's going to be a whole different speech now, a lot different than it would have been 2 days ago. Adding, quote, this is a chance to bring the whole country, even the whole world, together. Those images of Mr. Trump, face bloodied, fist in the air, in the moments after the shots were fired, now being embraced by his campaign in fundraising appeals, and by supporters touting his toughness.
This is the toughest guy I think I ever met.
Some Republicans now criticizing President Biden for his own recent comments like this rally speech Friday.
Most importantly, and I mean this from the bottom of my heart, Trump is a threat to this nation.
And for recently telling donors on a fundraising call, according to a source, quote, it's time to put Trump in the bullseye, insisting Trump also be pressed to answer questions in the wake of that much-panned debate.
I know that he didn't mean what is being implied there, but that kind of language on either side should be called out.
Mr. Trump's own speeches often filled with violent imagery.
The real threat is from the radical left, and it's growing every day, every single day. Our threat is from within.
Now, with the convention officially set to open, there are calls for both parties to temper their verbal attacks on one another.
They were shots heard around the world, and global leaders from Europe to South America, from the Middle East to Asia Pacific, have been swift in condemning the political violence at the rally and assassination attempt against former President Donald Trump. France's President Emmanuel Macron called the shooting, quote, a tragedy to our democracies. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said, quote, political violence in any form has no place in our societies. The Kremlin, showing how at odds Moscow is with Washington these days, blamed the Biden administration for instigating the violence. Here in China, a two-line statement on the Ministry of Foreign Affairs website over the weekend said that China is monitoring the situation and that China's leader Xi Jinping sent, quote, sympathy to former President Trump. It isn't clear how Xi sent that message, whether it was in a phone call or by other means. At a regular briefing today, a spokesperson said there's really nothing else to add. But even if little is being said officially, commentary about the shooting is rampant on China's tightly censored internet. Mostly people talking about how lucky Trump was and are now talking about his chances of winning. State media, however, has been ramping up rhetoric in editorials about America's political system being inferior to that of China's, and that this is, quote, a typical example of an American election. It's the sort of commentary that President Biden took aim at in his address from the Oval Office when he warned that foreign actors would be, quote, fanning the flames of division.